allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. There is an agenda over there. I think maybe most of you got a copy of it and a sign-in sheet there for the public. So, Dave had to attend another meeting tonight on the Township, and then Jake is overseas at some military. So just listen to forum. You all see the agenda there. I can get a motion to accept the adjustments.
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda for the September 15th meeting.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Public comments for agenda items only. I'll open up for public comments, 2 minutes for discussion. Anyone?
I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but I have a copy of the zoning stuff, and I see somebody's name on here who was in the Village of Lakeview. Why would we be zoning that?
No,
On Dave's report.
no, we'll go over that later.
Okay.
Yes.
I had a question about building,
What's your name?
Zane Abiger.
Okay, go ahead, then.
I'm going to, we're going to build a post frame residential, and I of course went over to the building department, and they said you need a print. You need a sealed print. I wasn't told that till after 6 months, but I did a lot of research in that time. I've got 2 neighbors with post frame homes, and so I called Dave and said I'd like to, put this up. He said, no, you cannot do that. And he said, if you show me one, I'll tear it down. I said, it's a little hostile for me, so I dropped the conversation at that point. And here I am. And he said, I couldn't do it. So I've got 2 neighbors with him. And these aren't shacks, they're $500,000 homes on up. And I guess my question is, how come my neighbors are able to do it and I can't? So that's the position I'm in right now.
Where do you live at, Zane, may I ask?
11818 Elmy Road.
Anything else?
Well, the building department didn't give me any indication there'd be a problem other than a sealed print until I called. And like I said, I've talked to people who built post frames all the way around here, trying to make sure I get all my information. I'm just trying to follow the correct process. And so the question is, why did I get a no, and can I get a variance? Since my neighbors have them, they butt up right against my property. I'm trying to follow things the right way, so I figured if anybody deserves a variance, I do, if that's what it takes. But
So, I mean, my belief is that, I don't want to get too much in a question and answer thing here, but they classify that as a barnuminium?
oh, they are.
Okay.
They're post frame, yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So we do have that on our agenda tonight. We'll talk through that in a little bit,
Okay.
if you will, but I know Dave's not here tonight. I think he's the one you're referring to, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so, yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that later on. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Anybody else? Yes.
I just kind of want to piggyback off what Zane said, as Dave made a comment in the board meeting that it has to be a continuous structure, and that's not true. It would be a continuous with a post and a slab with a rat wall. That would classify as a continuous space. So I don't know where Dave was looking. I haven't seen the ordinance. But that comment he made, that is absolutely wrong. Maybe misinterpretation, but I don't look at the ordinance. So I hope we can look at it as the planning commission and come up with something, because Zane's absolutely right, there's probably 7 of them in our township. So Dave's approved them, but now he's not approving this, so I hope the planning commission will come up with something to change that rule where Dave is being technical about, so.
Yes.
Actually, he presented it to the planning commission and they, or the board, I'm sorry, and they said the planning commission had to step in and try to get things lined up for him, so. Be great if you guys did.
Anybody else? Hearing none, and I'll close public comments. The July meeting minutes, I think you all have those. If I can,
The only thing I've got is, I think Jenny went off of, so we went from 24-hour time format to standard time format. And I think, so on the first page, comments closed at 6:06, I remember making that note. And then 1812 to 1841 is when we had the master plan update from Danielle. We need to make it cohesive that we're either gonna use AM PM format or 24-hour format, cause then if you go down to the next timestamp, it says 8:13, the meeting didn't go into 8:13, it would have been 7:13 to 7:18. So we just make those changes to show the proper time. And do we have a preference on 24-hour format or AM PM?
I don't think we need that.
Okay, because we're kinda got a combination of both, so.
Okay, so we'll make those adjustments.
Yeah, and like I said, the one that's really getting changed would be the public comment, the second set of public comments from 7:13 to 7:18.
Any others? So if I get a motion with those adjustments,
I'll make a motion to approve the July commission meeting minutes
with those adjustments.
with those adjustments, yeah.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Dave could not make it tonight, he had another meeting, another, location, so, just to go over the permits that he did give out. In June, he gave out 2 permits. One on Edgar Road, I think, 9963. A home, in an attached garage. Also, in June, 6850 Lake Macomb, a barn addition. None in July and August, on 6521. What's that road, Jenny?
Schmid,
Schmid Road, a home edition. And then on 11601, Spruce Street, Sprite Street,
Spruce.
Spruce, a new home.
Does that, on the June, does it say Edgar or Fitzner? Mine looks like it says Fitzner.
Probably is Fitzner, it's, I'm sorry. 9963 North, Fitzner.
I don't know.
And that should bring us up to date for our records. The Township Board, Dave?
Just, it's on the agenda, have the complaint form to approve and bring back 17th at 6 p.m. I understand this doesn't say, Jenny, you said it's at the new
It's at the road commission.
building in Canton. So we just need to let Randy know by October 10th, yes.
What day, the 17th?
17th at 6 p.m. And it's gonna be a state representative to address what's going on at state level, township, and answer any questions and concerns. Starts at 6, dinner is served at 6:30. It's $15 per person, but the township will pick up any official if you wanna go. I think it'd be a very good one to go to because, we talked, Randy brought it up at the meeting for the state level, wants to basically override solar, wind, gravel pit, and you wanna control it. I mean, I'm sure everybody's seen the news, but this, being them, they could be in the heat of it. They go back and session first of October, she said, so it'd be a good one to ask. If you have any questions or.
If I'm available, I'll go on the change schedule.
You said you gotta let her know by the 10th.
By the 10th, yeah, I need to know head count by the 10th, so Todd can send a check out. And then there's been some, at the last meeting, some questions on if we're gonna go over the wind ordinance again and modify it back to how it was before the other township board member changed it, and she said it'd come back to us.
Just us?
So,
Okay,
she said, she knows we're trying to get this done and solar done, but, I'm sure by the time we know, the state can decide,
well, the good thing is we do have a wind ordinance.
yes, and like she said, it's restrictive, but it's not as restrictive as we had it, but at least we have one end, is the way she explained it to me.
Your thoughts?
Everybody I talked to, they just want us to make a motion and put it to the ordinance that we wrote together.
What do we gotta do to?
We have to do it all, we have to have a public meeting, we have to do the whole process.
I thought we didn't have to because we've already had it approved. Just go back through the whole process again.
You do have to go through the whole process again, but you could combine your solar and your wind.
So, thoughts, Joe, I guess?
I think it's something we need to definitely look into, definitely. Yes. I think it's very turned away originally.
Yeah, my thought is, I guess, is that we need to get this master plan done, and we need to get into solar and get that done.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I guess at that point, we could tack it on to and have one public meeting.
Back to the original wind ordinance, add in the new solar and have that taken care of all at once. Cause we have to do, submitting it to the
County.
yeah, county board and the public comment, all that,
Send it all out to them.
so.
We approved to put in both newspapers, it was just in Lakeview, and now it's
For both,
for posting notices.
okay.
It was like that, she said before, and then it went off to Daily News, and now we're back into. Now the Lakeview paper's supposed to be putting it online. She said as of Friday they were getting it done, I don't know. She thought by the time it's tied, we have to do another one, we could have them both. And then, Brenda Minions was brought up, but I had to put that in. So I didn't cut it out. Pretty much.
So let's get into our old business master plan. Danielle, this is our main focus for tonight, so.
So if you guys recall, the full draft of the master plan was sent out, a few weeks ago to kind of start getting the review and comment period, started and kick-started, so we can kind of talk through any changes you guys would like to make, or anything that you were hoping to see in the plan that maybe isn't in there, or any inaccuracies. I will say off the top that the acknowledgement section is not complete because I could not find the names of the township board members online, so if I could just get a list of township board members, that would be great. So that's why that section of the plan is blank under acknowledgements, just, because I haven't met anybody yet, aside from our liaison here. So as you guys recall, we've kind of, have gone through some of the plan content already in, sort of bite-sized chunks over the last, several months, in addition to, the public survey that had went out, as well as a public open house. So just to kind of give some brief updates of, the draft, the highlights, or main highlights of this draft. Under goals and objectives, the main goals of the plan relate to, land use, which of course is gonna have a heavy emphasis on protecting the agricultural nature of the township and balancing growth and development to areas that make the most sense, preventing any sort of, degradation to prime farmland areas, and, preserving the rural character of the township. Housing, so to provide housing opportunities, within the township, in areas that are most appropriate, which I'll get into a bit more when we discuss the future land use section of the plan. Economic development is the third goal, and that would be to increase the tax base of the township, thereby improving the ability of the township to provide services to residents and businesses. Streets, encourage the development encourage development in areas where the road network supports it. And then parks and recreation, to support the establishment of Township Parks and Rec Network, to work in harmony with the township's rural nature while providing high quality of life for residents. So, again, much of this was carryover from your current plan that you have, and through our conversations and, what we heard from the community, it was deemed appropriate to kind of carry forward these goals into the next plan. With regard to existing conditions, some highlights from the existing conditions analysis, with regard to the, demographic review. Again, I will just briefly note that this information that is, the demographics chapter in the plan, derives from the 2020 census data, as well as the American Community Survey data. So Cato Township's population has grown about 8.5% between years 2000 and 2020. I should note though that the actual number that 8.5 equates to is, I think it was like roughly around, I can look it up really quickly, I have it open. Around 100-ish people. So just to note there that 8.5% seems relatively high, what equates to about 100 people, given the township's total population. I should also note too that the demographics chapter in the plan does exclude Village of Lakeview numbers. So the way that the census, because the census basically mashes together townships and villages into the same thing, so what we did was look up Cato Township and Village of Lakeview, and then remove Village of Lakeview demographics, so that way you can look at just what the township has. But we did include Village of Lakeview information in here, so you could kind of compare and see where they're at too as well. The median age of the township skews slightly younger at around 40.7 years old. And interestingly, the largest population in the township is age group 15 to 19, which equates to about 11.5% of the township as a whole. So basically what that tells us is that there's a lot of families that have school-age children in the township, which then likely equates to needs for entertainment activities, parks and recreation, quality schools, things that younger families or families with younger children or school-age children would be more interested in. Also interestingly, the school-aged, family-forming, and mature family age groups are almost near even with one another. So when I say school-age, that's about 5 to 19 years old, which equates to about 25.5% of the population. Family forming is 20 years old to 44 years old, so families with young children or people or families who are still having children equates to about 27.2% of the township, and then mature families 45 to 64, so that's going to be your families that likely have like adult children who maybe live out of the house or college age kids, and that equates to about 29.8% of the township. Another interesting note is that the largest number of homes in the township were built between years 1990 and 1999. So therefore, the largest or the highest percentage of the township's current housing stock is roughly between 24 to 33 years old. So, just as a general rule of thumb, houses that are aged about 30 years and up end up having more needs for being taken care of or considering aging in place opportunities and things like that. So, relatively, your housing stock in the township is in good shape. Numbers speaking strictly.
Age-wise though, is that getting old?
Getting there, but I would say that like in many other communities in the area, you have a lot of like legacy homes that are quite a bit older because perhaps they're like farmhouses that have been around for a long time. I would say it's kind of on the cusp of getting there to where there might need to be something addressed in the future as these homes continue to age, like throughout the duration of this plan, since we're looking at 10, 15, 20 years into the future and what those current homes may look like. But that could be just something to think about, that if the township has any opportunities or options to kind of hone in on, I don't know, programs for rehabilitation or assisting connecting the dots to folks who maybe want to age in place but can't afford it and things like that. There is also a relatively high percentage of vacant housing units, around 19%. However, it should be noted that the census does count seasonal homes or people who are snowbirds as a vacant home. So I just thought that was important to note too, that number might look pretty alarming. But I did look into the actual data of that, and it was basically like a vast majority are homes that are considered seasonal or perhaps cottages or something to that effect. So just to note that too, that it's not like you have residential streets full of a ton of vacant homes. Then the plan kind of goes into a little bit more detail on existing conditions with regard to natural features and resources, a little bit more information with regard to the surface waters that you guys have, the plethora of lakes in the township, wetlands and woodland areas. Then there are a few maps that kind of that demonstrate where those wetlands and water features are located within the township. So that will be kind of important when considering where future land uses will go, or where prime farmland is located, and lucrative soils and areas for to target for preservation. So the prime farmland areas in the township are largely located on the southwest quadrant of the township. So like south of 46 and west of 91, basically that square there. So those are areas that your current zoning and the future land use plan have addresses as more farmland preservation type areas, even if it's large lot residential. Moving to our township utilities, I did a brief analysis on the current broadband and DSL connectivity as well as wireless connectivity. It seems like there really isn't any challenges, or at least from what the data tells me. Perhaps people who live here may tell me differently. But according to the map I found online by the state, it does seem like there's quite a bit of connectivity as far as broadband goes in that. But just something to consider in the future too, that if, throughout the duration of this plan, that, to kind of always keep modern and current policies and keep abreast of any type of infrastructure that may be available with regard to wireless connectivity and broadband connectivity. Transportation system, basically that the road classification network discusses how the county typically classifies your roads. Basically this is related to how funding is allocated at the state level for road improvement projects. So typically we include that in a plan or in a master plan to kind of give a feel of the road infrastructure, paved roads versus unpaved roads, and if there's any sort of plan to pave any roads that are currently unpaved, and so forth. But typically it just kind of, those classification systems are just used by the state and federal government for funneling money for whatever improvement projects are happening. So with regard to the future land use plan, scroll down. The last page of your memo, includes the draft of the future land use map. I made those edits that we had talked about, from our previous meeting. So the future land use plan, there are several planning principles that are utilized, when this future land use plan is created. The first of which is, consistency. So development should be reviewed, as a general consistency with the intent of the master plan as well as regional plans. So when you have a development, proposal as a planning commission that comes to you, you want to make sure that the development proposal meets your goals of, and your overall land use themes of the master plan or the future land use plan, to just kind of make sure that there's that consistent, flow of land use patterns that are being planned for. Concurrence and compactness. Growth should generally be compact in most cases and directed to areas to maximize the use of public investment and capital improvements. So of course you want to steer development where that particular area, that type of development would be the highest and best use for that particular area. So of course, that's going to be your major road corridors where you have most of your development that would be most appropriate, rather than encroaching into any of the rural residential areas or farmland preservation areas. So those development areas are going to look more consistent along with, around the peripheries of where the village is located and, the lakes. Sustainability, natural systems, of course, you want to design your plans around, the natural features and assets that you want to preserve. So again, valuable farmland, high acreage rural residential, areas that you want to preserve, wetlands, woodlands, all of those important things are taken into account when, designing a future land use plan. And then of course, human scale, the community should be designed on a human scale with a land use pattern that's balanced around activity centers such as lakes and schools and community facilities, parks, and other similar type of features. So of course, growth and development would likely steer areas where development is already occurring, to prevent any leapfrog type development or any sprawl that may compromise the rural character of the township. For the future land use categories, so the agriculture category is going to be largely comprised of the southern portion of the township, that's south of the village, and south of 46. And again, those are the areas of the township that have been identified as part of the prime farmland area. So it'd be important to kind of make sure that agricultural enterprises are being supported and promoted in these areas. And then I'll kind of get into how that relates to zoning in a minute. For rural residential is going to be majority of the northern part of the township, outside of the immediately adjacent areas surrounding both Town Line Lake and the village of Lakeview. Rural residential are going to be your typical large lot, single family homes, perhaps hobby farms might be located on rural residential lots, or perhaps small scale agricultural operations, but that will be your typical rural character that you see throughout the township. Neighborhood residential areas are the orange areas depicted on the future land use map, and those areas are located around the periphery of the village and then on the northern part of Town Line Lake. And essentially those areas are planned to have a little bit more dense typical neighborhood type character. So the idea here is that you want to promote cluster development or open space development to support smaller lot sizes, but what that does when you support and encourage and promote smaller lot sizes in areas that are appropriate is that you have other opportunities for preservation around that. So you're saving wetlands, woodlands, farmland, and all that type of thing. So it may seem a bit counterintuitive, but density in appropriate areas is the best way to preserve rural character. Lakefront residential, so those are the areas depicted in yellow on the map, on the future land use map, and that's immediately adjacent properties to the lake. And then I'll get to what that means from a zoning perspective in the next chapter. Business business enterprise, if you guys recall, we discussed this, concept, during the last meeting, but, those are going to be the areas in red on the map. And those areas basically signify that any type of commercial development would be appropriate here. So whether if it's commercial or light industrial, that corridor, M46 has that character kind of already developing, where you have sort of that like gray area of there being restaurants and commercial businesses intermingled with light industrial businesses, and they all work together. And the idea here is that we want to promote flexible land uses, and what in turn that will do is kind of encourage more growth and development to appropriate areas. And then lastly, public, semi-public, these are just government properties or township or state-owned properties that may end up being, or may be parkland or municipal buildings or a fire department or a boat launch or something of that nature. So the reason why this is pulled out specifically in the future land use map is because public, semi-public uses are generally permitted in any zoning district. So it's not necessarily like public, semi-public is going to be its own district where you have these uses that are only permitted in these areas. It's, you know, if you have a government building or if you have a boat launch or if you have a park, they can be pretty much placed in any appropriate area within any district where it makes sense. So that's kind of why it's pulled out into its own thing, which I can understand can be a little bit convoluted sometimes, but just something to note there. So moving into the zoning plan. Any questions before I keep? Okay. Moving into the zoning plan. So the zoning plan is a state requirement that basically the main goal here is to show and demonstrate the relationship between your future land use categories and your zoning and your current zoning districts. So land uses and zoning are two very different things. So this map that is in the plan here is not a zoning map, but it's a future land use map. And the future land use map is your guiding policy document that helps to assist with zoning decision making. So for example, if you had a property owner come to you and say, I want to rezone my property from A to B, you would take that proposal and measure it against your future land use map to use as a key driving decision-making factor of if that rezoning is appropriate and makes sense for your vision for the future of the township. So the future land use category, the agricultural district relates directly to the AR, or ag residential district, that you currently have. The rural residential relates directly to the RR district that you currently have. Lakefront residential, I'm proposing a new district be created for lakefront properties and lakefront homes and lakefront uses.